In moments of crisis, the most important civic duty is not blind loyalty to indoctrinated narratives, but the courage to question power. Democracies survive not by suppressing debate, but by encouraging it. When the drums of war begin to sound and governments move swiftly into military action, it becomes even more essential for citizens and independent analysts to examine the motives, the legality and the consequences of such actions beyond the official narratives presented to the public. The joint United States-Israel military strikes against Iran have triggered precisely such a moment. The attacks, launched on February 28, ignited a dangerous escalation in an already volatile region. What was presented as a security operation immediately raised profound questions about legality, geopolitical motivations, and the broader consequences for international stability. The strikes have resulted in widespread destruction and significant loss of life, including civilians, while dramatically raising the risk of a wider regional war that could spiral into a global confrontation. Wars rarely emerge in isolation. They are usually the culmination of long-standing political tensions, strategic calculations, and competing interests. In the case of Iran, the conflict cannot be understood without examining decades of geopolitical hostility that began long before the current crisis. Since the Iranian Revolution of 1979 removed a Western-backed monarchy and established an independent political order, Iran has faced a continuous campaign of economic sanctions, covert operations, diplomatic isolation, and strategic pressure from the United States and its allies. Each episode of tension has reinforced the broader struggle over influence in the Middle East, energy resources, and regional power balances. The legality of the recent attacks also remains highly contested. International law, particularly the United Nations Charter, clearly restricts the use of force between states, except in cases of self-defense or when authorized by the United Nations Security Council. Any military operation outside those frameworks raises serious questions about whether it constitutes an act of aggression rather than legitimate self-defense. Critics argue that bypassing international legal mechanisms weakens the global rules designed to prevent unilateral wars and risks normalizing military solutions to political disputes. Another element shaping the crisis is the close political alignment between Washington and Tel Aviv. The strategic partnership between the United States and Israel has long been a defining feature of Middle Eastern geopolitics. Diplomatic support, military cooperation, and repeated use of veto power in the United Nations Security Council have enabled Israel to maintain significant freedom of action despite widespread international criticism of some of its policies. This relationship has often placed the United States in the position of defending or enabling actions that many other nations view as destabilizing. Domestic political dynamics inside the United States also form part of the background to the conflict. Modern American elections have become increasingly shaped by the influence of enormous campaign donations from wealthy individuals and interest groups. Since the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision opened the door to vast political spending, the influence of powerful donors has expanded dramatically. Critics argue that this environment allows private interests and lobbying networks to exert disproportionate influence over foreign policy decisions, including those related to military strategy and international alliances. Political leaders have historically been tempted to use external conflicts as tools for domestic political consolidation. Moments of war often generate waves of patriotism that can temporarily strengthen political authority and distract from internal controversies. Throughout history, struggling administrations have sometimes resorted to aggressive foreign policies in order to shift public attention away from domestic challenges. Whether such calculations played a role in the present crisis remains a subject of debate, but the pattern itself is not unfamiliar in the history of great powers. Another shadow hanging over contemporary political discourse is the growing number of scandals involving powerful individuals across politics, business, and intelligence circles. The revelations surrounding international networks connected to figures like Jeffrey Epstein have demonstrated how influence, money, and power can intertwine in ways that create vulnerability to blackmail and manipulation. Although the full scope of those networks remains unclear, the episode has contributed to a broader climate of public mistrust toward political elites and the institutions that protect them. Beyond the political drama, the strategic consequences of the Iran strikes could be enormous. Military escalation in the Persian Gulf threatens global energy markets, international trade routes, and the fragile balance of power across the Middle East. Iran occupies a critical geographic position controlling access to the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes. Any sustained conflict in the region will therefore reverberate far beyond the battlefield, affecting economies across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The human consequences are even more immediate. Wars that begin with claims of precision and limited objectives often expand unpredictably. Civilian populations inevitably suffer the heaviest burdens as infrastructure collapses, supply chains break down, and displacement spreads across entire regions. The modern Middle East has already endured decades of conflict, and another large-scale war risks deepening cycles of instability that will take generations to repair. Perhaps the most troubling dimension of the crisis is the broader erosion of international norms. The global system established after the Second World War was designed to limit unilateral warfare and encourage diplomatic solutions to disputes. When powerful states circumvent those mechanisms, they weaken the very framework that has helped prevent large-scale conflict between major powers for decades. If international law becomes optional rather than binding, the result could be a return to a far more dangerous era of power politics. Within the United States itself, the consequences are also becoming visible. The war has intensified political polarization and triggered widespread protests, revealing a nation deeply divided over its role in global affairs. Many Americans question whether endless foreign confrontations serve their interest or merely drain resources while creating new enemies abroad. The debate reflects a broader struggle over the direction of American power in an increasingly multipolar world. Globally, the economic repercussions could be severe. Military escalation in energy-producing regions often leads to spikes in commodity prices, disruptions in trade, and heightened financial uncertainty. Economists warn that sustained conflict could push fragile economies into recession and destabilize global markets already strained by inflation, debt, and geopolitical tensions. The cascading effects could echo across continents, affecting food supplies, industrial production, and employment. The unfolding crisis therefore represents far more than a regional confrontation. It raises fundamental questions about the future of international order, the limits of military power, and the role of democratic accountability in decisions of war and peace. When governments bypass debate and plunge into conflict, the consequences extend far beyond the battlefield. At moments like these, the responsibility of legislators, journalists, and citizens becomes especially important. Democracies depend on institutions capable of restraining executive power and demanding transparency in matters of war. If elected representatives fail to scrutinize military actions or challenge reckless strategies, the risk of strategic miscalculation grows dramatically. History has shown repeatedly that wars launched with confidence can spiral into disasters that reshape entire generations. The Middle East has already endured the consequences of such miscalculations in Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan. Each conflict began with assurances of quick victory and noble objectives. Each left behind fractured societies and enduring instability. The current confrontation with Iran carries similar dangers. Escalation could draw in regional powers, disrupt the global economy, and undermine the fragile architecture of international cooperation. Once unleashed, the forces of war rarely remain confined to the intentions of those who initiate them. The world, therefore, stands at a crossroads between diplomacy and escalation. Stability and peace cannot be built through threats, missiles, and strategic gambles that risk catastrophic outcomes. They require dialogue, restraint, and recognition that even great powers are bound by the same rules that govern smaller states. In the end, the lesson of history is clear. When nations abandon those rules and allow geopolitical ambition to override international law, the consequences are rarely contained. They spread across borders, economies, and generations, leaving behind a legacy of conflict that far outlasts the political calculations that started it. For deeper analysis across a wide spectrum of geopolitical, economic, and social issues, and to explore a rich archive of thought-provoking articles, I invite you to visit my website at www.oblongmedia.net, where a treasure trove of insightful content awaits. Thank you. This is an Oblong Media Global Intelligence Analysis.